What if Kenjaku took over Gojo's body instead of Geto's? Now stay with me and imagine this. Toji Fushiguro has just done the unthinkable. For this what if moment, we'll use the only time Gojo was close to death. Don't forget to check out our other video, What If Toji Killed Gojo? Now moving on. Toji has just killed Gojo. He's taken down Satoru Gojo, the so-called strongest sorcerer. His body lies motionless, the 6 eyes dim, the limitless technique silenced. The world of Jujutsu sorcery has just lost its greatest asset. But what if this wasn't the end for Gojo, or at least his body? What if in this moment of vulnerability, someone else saw an opportunity? Not just anyone, Kinjaku. Kinjaku is a centuries-old mastermind that has always been about exploiting opportunities. His original plan was to take over Suguru Geto's body, but here's a twist. What if Gojo's death presented a far more tempting option? Think about it. Gojo's body isn't just a vessel, it's the ultimate weapon. The 6 eyes, the limitless technique, the sheer cursed energy reserves. For Kinjaku, this isn't just a chance to survive, it's a chance to dominate. So, let's break it down. Toji walks away, thinking he's changed the course of history, but Kinjaku steps in, and everything changes. The moment Gojo dies, Kinjaku sees an opening. His technique, the body swapping ability, requires the target to be dead, and now, the strongest body in the Jujutsu world is up for grabs. What happens next? Kinjaku doesn't just take over Gojo's body, he reshapes the entire Jujutsu landscape. Imagine Kinjaku with the 6 eyes. Imagine him wielding the limitless technique. The balance of power doesn't just shift, it shatters. The higher-ups in Jujutsu society, they're not ready for this. The other sorcerers, they don't stand a chance. And Kinjaku, he's just getting started. Kinjaku doesn't waste time. The moment Gojo's body hits the ground, he's already moving. His cursed energy swirls around him, a dark, oppressive force that seems to warp the very air. He kneels beside Gojo's lifeless body, his grin widening as he examines the prize before him. The 6 eyes, the limitless technique, this is the ultimate vessel, and Kinjaku knows exactly how to use it. The process begins. Kinjaku's technique, the body swapping ability, is a grotesque yet precise art. He doesn't just take over a body, he rewrites its very essence. The cursed energy signatures merge, the soul is displaced, and Kinjaku's consciousness takes root. It's not just a transfer, it's a complete overhaul. And with Gojo's body, the possibilities are endless. But let's pause for a second. What does this mean for the Jujutsu world? Gojo was the linchpin, the one person who could keep the balance. Without him, the higher-ups are scrambling. The curses are growing bolder. And now, with Kinjaku in control of Gojo's body, the entire system is thrown into chaos. The strongest sorcerer is no longer an ally, he's the ultimate enemy. But they don't know that yet. Let's talk about the immediate fallout. The Jujutsu world is in disarray. Without Gojo, the balance is shattered. The curses are running rampant, and the sorcerers are struggling to keep up. And now, with Kinjaku in control of Gojo's body, the stakes are higher than ever. The other sorcerers like Geto, Naname, the principal, they're all facing a threat they can't even comprehend. But here's the thing, Kinjaku isn't just a threat because of his power. It's his mind that makes him dangerous. He's always 10 steps ahead, always thinking, always planning. With Gojo's body, he's not just a mastermind, he's a force of nature. And the Jujutsu world, it's not ready for what's coming. The news spreads like wildfire. Satoru Gojo is dead. The strongest sorcerer, the man who stood as the unshakable pillar of the Jujutsu world, is gone. At first, no one believes it. How could they? Gojo was supposed to be untouchable, a force of nature that even the most powerful curses feared. But as the reports come in, as the evidence mounts, the truth becomes impossible to ignore. Gojo is dead, and the Jujutsu world is thrown into chaos. The higher-ups are the first to react. They're panicked, scrambling to fill the void left by Gojo's absence. Emergency meetings are held, strategies are debated, but no one has a clear answer. Without Gojo, the balance is shattered. The curses, sensing weakness, grow bolder, attacks increase, and the sorcerers are stretched thin. The Jujutsu world is on the brink of collapse. But there's another layer to this chaos. Gojo's body is missing. After the battle, a team is sent to retrieve it, but they find nothing. No body, no traces of cursed energy, nothing. It's as if Gojo simply vanished. The higher-ups are baffled. How could a body just disappear? They launched investigations, but every lead turns up empty. The mystery deepens, and with it, the fear. Gojo's death and the subsequent disappearance of his body has far-reaching consequences. Without Gojo, the Jujutsu world loses its strongest defender. The higher-ups, already corrupt and self-serving, become even more desperate. They begin to make reckless decisions, prioritizing their own survival over the greater good. The sorcerers, meanwhile, are left to pick up the pieces, but without Gojo's guidance, they're struggling to stay afloat. And then then there's the impact on the cursed spirit population. With Gojo gone, the curses no longer have a natural predator. They grow stronger, more numerous, and more organized. Some even begin to develop human-like intelligence, forming alliances and strategizing their attacks. The Jujutsu world is facing a threat unlike anything it's seen before. Rumors begin to spread. Some say Gojo's body was taken by a powerful curse. Others believe it was stolen by a rival faction. And then there are the whispers of something darker, something more sinister, but no one can prove anything. The truth is buried, and the Jujutsu world is left to grapple with the uncertainty. Meanwhile, Kenjaku watches from the shadows. He's the one who took Gojo's body, of course, but he's in no rush to reveal himself. Let the world panic. Let them tear themselves apart trying to figure out what happened. The chaos only serves his purpose. With the Jujutsu world in disarray, his plans can move forward unimpeded. And what are those plans? Let's break it down. Kenjaku's ultimate goal is the merger of humanity and cursed spirits, a world where the lines between the two are blurred. With Gojo's body, he has the power to make that vision a reality. But first, he needs to destabilize the Jujutsu world even further, and he knows exactly how to do it. His first move is subtle but devastating. He begins to manipulate the cursed spirit population, using his newfound power to amplify their strength and aggression. The curses, already emboldened by Gojo's absence, become even more dangerous. Attacks on humans and sorcerers alike increase exponentially. The Jujutsu world is forced to divert all its resources to dealing with the immediate threat, leaving them vulnerable to Kenjaku's next move. And that move is even more calculated. Kenjaku begins to sow discord among the sorcerers themselves. Using Gojo's body, he infiltrates their ranks, spreading misinformation and turning allies against each other. Trust erodes, alliances fracture, and the Jujutsu world is left even more divided. By the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. Kenjaku's already several steps ahead. Don't worry, I'll break it down in a second. But let's not forget about the other key players in this story. Yuta, Megami, Yuji, without meeting Gojo, grow up differently. For them, they're unaware of who Gojo was. It's the loss of a symbol. In the original timeline, Gojo was the one who gave them hope, who made them believe they could stand against the darkness. Without him in this timeline, their hearts and minds don't feel the same way. Yuta, in particular, is hit hard in the original timeline. He's always looked up to Gojo, seeing him as a role model, but here, he never meets him. But amidst all this chaos, there's one thing the higher-ups are pushing for. They need answers. What happened to Gojo's body? Who or what took it? And what does it mean for the future of the Jujutsu world? They begin to investigate, following every lead, no matter how small. But what they don't realize is that they're walking right into Kenjaku's trap. Kenjaku's next move is calculated. He doesn't reveal himself immediately. No, that would be too obvious. Instead, he bides his time, letting the world believe Gojo is still dead. He observes, he plans, and he waits for the perfect moment to strike. And when he does, it's devastating. Imagine this: Kenjaku, wearing Gojo's face, walks into a meeting of the higher-ups. They're shocked, relieved, thinking their savior has returned. But then, he smiles. That same eerie grin that's haunted the Jujutsu world for centuries. And before they can react, it's over. The Limitless technique activates, and the room is reduced to rubble. The higher-ups are gone, and Kinjaku is in control. But it's not just about power. Kinjaku has a vision, a grand plan that spans centuries. With Gojo's body, he can accelerate that plan. The barriers between the human world and the cursed spirit world, he can dismantle them. The merger of humanity and cursed spirits, he can make it a reality. And the other sorcerers, they're just pawns in his game. The time for his integration seems perfect. No one can prove anything. The higher-ups of the Jujutsu world, gone. Their bodies left in pieces. Their offices drenched in blood. A massacre so precise, so effortless, that no one dares question who did it. There's only one man capable of such a thing, Gojo Satoru, or at least, that's what they think. Kenjaku doesn't just kill them, he erases them, rewriting the rules of the Jujutsu world in a single night. With the conservative elders removed, there's no one left to oppose his vision, no one to suspect the truth. The world still believes in its strongest sorcerer, in the blindfolded god who walks among them. And why wouldn't they? The 6 eyes are intact, the Limitless is untouched, but behind those eyes, a different mind is at work. Kenjaku, still wearing Gojo's face, begins to manipulate them from the shadows. He plants false leads, misdirects their efforts, and slowly but surely, he turns them against each other. By the time they realize what's happening, it's too late. The damage is done, and Kenjaku is ready to make his next move. And that move is nothing short of catastrophic. Using Gojo's body, Kenjaku begins to dismantle the barriers between the human world and the cursed spirit world. The effects are immediate and devastating. Cursed spirits pour into the human world, wreaking havoc on an unprecedented scale. Cities are overrun, lives are lost, and the Jujutsu world is left scrambling to respond. But even as the chaos unfolds, Kenjaku isn't done. He has more cards to play, one that will cement his dominance over the Jujutsu world. He reveals himself, not as Kenjaku, but as Gojo. The sorcerers are stunned, unable to comprehend what they're seeing. Gojo is alive? But how? And why is he back after all these years? The truth, of course, is far more horrifying. This isn't Gojo, it's Kenjaku, wearing his face, wielding his power. He plays his role perfectly, laughs when he's supposed to, smirks when people expect him to. He keeps the students in check, maintaining the illusion that everything is fine. But slowly, carefully, he begins dismantling what Gojo spent years building. He uses Jujutsu High as a tool to be manipulated. The students are pawns in a game they don't even know they're playing. He lets them believe they're safe, that Gojo Satoru is watching over them, that as long as he's here, nothing can go wrong. It's almost too easy. While the Shibuya chaos was slowly coming to brew, Suguru Geto had been elsewhere, pursuing his own agenda. Since Gojo's disappearance, Geto had distanced himself from the Jujutsu world. He had his own reasons, his own plans, and his own doubts about the system. But when he heard the news, Gojo was back. He couldn't stay away. Geto arrived at Jujutsu High, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. He hadn't seen Gojo in years, not since their paths had diverged. But despite everything, Gojo was still his friend, or at least he had been. When Geto saw him standing there, alive and seemingly unharmed, a part of him wanted to believe it was real, that Gojo had returned, that things could go back to the way they were. But something felt off. Gojo's demeanor was different. Maybe his brush with death had changed him. Gojo turned to him, regaining his smile. Maybe it was all in his head. For now, he was glad to have his best friend back. Geto still had his doubts, but he stifled them. Anime lover boy here, mid-editing. I just wanted to pause the video and ask you to subscribe if you like this kind of video. And while you're down there, why not leave a like as well? Then comes Shibuya, and it is a different kind of nightmare. The plan was always to seal Gojo in the prison realm, to remove him from the board and let chaos take over. But Kinjaku doesn't need that anymore. He is Gojo, so the plan changes. When October 31st arrives, Shibuya still becomes a battlefield. Curses flood the streets. Innocents die in droves. The veil is cast, and the city becomes a playground of horrors. But there's no desperate struggle to seal the strongest sorcerer. Instead, there's a massacre. Kenjaku, as in the original timeline, works with cursed spirits like Hanami, Mojito, and Jogo to bring chaos. In the original timeline, they were focused on sealing Gojo, or at least slowing him down. But here, there is no reason. The Shibuya incident was supposed to be a turning point for the Jujutsu world, a coordinated effort to eliminate the curses threatening humanity. But no one could have predicted what actually happened. The moment Gojo Satoru, or rather the entity wearing his face, appeared on the scene, everything changed. The sorcerers had been fighting tirelessly, pushing back against the waves of curses that had overrun Shibuya. They were exhausted, battered, but determined. And then he arrived, Gojo, the strongest. At first, there was relief. If Gojo was here, they could win. They could end this nightmare. But that relief was short-lived. Gojo's presence was different this time. His usual carefree demeanor was gone, replaced by an eerie calm. His 6 eyes glowed with an intensity that sent chills down the spines of everyone present. And then he smiled. It wasn't the reassuring smile they were used to. It was cold, calculating, and utterly devoid of humanity. Before anyone could react, Gojo raised his hand. The air around him twisted and warped as the Limitless technique activated. But instead of targeting the curses, he turned it on the sorcerers. The ground erupted, buildings collapsed, and chaos erupted. The sorcerers barely had time to process what was happening before they were forced to defend themselves, not from the curses, but from the man they had once called their ally. And then, the curses appeared. Mojito, Jogo, Hanami, Dagon. They stepped out of the shadows, flanking Gojo like loyal soldiers. The sorcerers stared in horror. This wasn't just a betrayal, it was a nightmare come to life. Gojo, the strongest sorcerer, was working with the curses. He wasn't just working with them, he was leading them. The battle that follows is nothing short of catastrophic. Gojo's mastery of the Limitless technique makes him nearly untouchable. He moved through the battlefield like a force of nature, his every action precise and devastating. The sorcerers tried to fight back, but they were outmatched. Without Gojo on their side, they stood no chance. Mojito, being the sadist, revels in the chaos. His idol transfiguration technique wreaked havoc, twisting and mutating anything unfortunate enough to get too close. Jogo unleashed his flames, reducing entire city blocks to ash. Hanami and Dagon added to the destruction, their cursed techniques tearing through everything in their path. And at the center of it all was Gojo, his expression unreadable as he watched the carnage unfold. But it wasn't just the physical destruction that made this battle so devastating. It was the emotional toll. The sorcerers had trusted Gojo. They had looked up to him, relied on him, believed in him, and now he was their enemy. The betrayal cut deep, leaving them shaken and unsure of what to do. Nanami, trying to rally the others, knew this could not be Gojo. Yuji, meanwhile, was struggling to process what was happening. He had never met Gojo, but he had heard the stories. The strongest sorcerer, the one who could change the world, and now that same person was tearing it apart. Yuji's fist clenched as he stared at Gojo's figure in the distance. But stopping Gojo was easier said than done. His mastery of the Limitless technique made him nearly invincible. Every attack the sorcerers launched was neutralized before it could even reach him, and when he countered, the results were devastating. The battlefield was littered with the bodies of fallen sorcerers, their lives snuffed out in an instant. And then there was Mojito. The curse had always been a thorn in the sorcerer's side, but now, with Gojo backing him up, he was more dangerous than ever. Yuji had fought him several times before now, and he was a huge problem. His idol transfiguration technique was a nightmare, twisting and mutating anyone who got too close. Yuji, in particular, found himself locked in a brutal battle with the curse. Every punch, every kick, every ounce of curse energy he poured into the fight seemed to have no effect. Mojito just kept coming, his grin widening with every blow. The battle raged on, each side pushing themselves to their limits. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear: the Jujutsu world would never be the same. Gojo's betrayal had shattered the fragile balance that had held it together. The curses were stronger than ever, and the sorcerers were on the brink of collapse. And then, just when it seemed like all hope was lost, something unexpected happened. Kenjaku paused. His 6 eyes scanned the battlefield, taking in the destruction he had caused. And for a moment, just a moment, his expression softened. It was as if deep down, the real Gojo was still there, fighting to break free. The moment passed, and the cold, calculating mask returned. Kenjaku raised his hand, and the battlefield fell silent. He declared that the age of curses was upon them, and there was nothing they could do. When Geto arrived in Shibuya, the battle was already in full swing. The sight of Gojo leading the curses was like a punch to the gut. It was like a confirmation of something he buried deep inside. Geto didn't hesitate. He stepped into the fray, his cursed spirits swirling around him. He had to stop this. He had to stop Gojo. But even as he fought, a part of him held back. This was still Gojo's body, his friend's body. How could he bring himself to destroy it? The battle was brutal. Geto's cursed spirits clashed with Mojito, Jogo's flames, and Hanami. But the real challenge was Gojo. His Limitless technique was as devastating as ever, and Geto found himself struggling to keep up. Every move he made was countered, every attack neutralized. It was like fighting a shadow, an unstoppable, untouchable shadow. And then it happened. In the heat of the battle, Geto locked eyes with Gojo. For a moment, just a moment, he saw something familiar. A flicker of the old Gojo, the one he had known, the one he had called his friend. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared, replaced by that cold, calculating stare. The brief moment of hesitation cost him as he crumbled to the floor, his lungs pooling with blood. Sukuna watches with interest. This isn't the battle he expected. This isn't the same Gojo, and he can tell. But he doesn't interfere. Not yet. Meanwhile, Kinjaku ensures the world falls further into chaos. The sorcerers who would have opposed him are gone. The ones who remain are too weak and too broken to fight back. And when the dust settles, when the survivors finally regroup, they're left with a terrifying realization. Gojo Satoru is only the same on the outside, and they are more alone than ever. For Sukuna, he's seen men rise and fall, clinging to their fleeting moments of power. He's watched empires crumble, kings kneel, and civilizations rot. He's killed gods before, or at least men who thought themselves divine. But this is different. Gojo Satoru was always an obstacle, a wall standing between Sukuna and true freedom. But this man, the one wearing Gojo's face, moves differently, kills differently. There's no righteous fury, no arrogance, just killing. Sukuna sees it, feels it. This is not the man he fought in the past. And for the first time in 1,000 years, he is intrigued. Kenjaku doesn't need to fight Sukuna, not yet. Instead, he lets things play out. He watches as Yuji stumbles through the wreckage of Shibuya, as Megami clings to the last remnants of his sanity. He watches as the pieces pieces fall into place as the world adjusts to its new reality. Sukuna is waiting, watching, testing the limits of this new world. He doesn't act recklessly, not yet, because he knows, just as Kenjaku does, that the balance of power has shifted and neither of them is ready to break the silence first. The world is already on fire. Kenjaku just throws in the match. The Culling Game begins, but this time, there's no resistance, no last-minute strategy to counteract his plans. Megumi fights, desperate to lead. He steps into his role as the new head of the Zenin clan, clinging to the power he never wanted. But he is alone. There is no Gojo to guide him, no light to follow, only orders from a man who wears his mentor's face. Yuji is lost, haunted. His friends are dying, his enemies are everywhere, and the one person who could have saved them all is the one leading them to their deaths. Kenjaku watches it unfold, and for the first time in centuries, he wonders, is this what victory feels like? But there is one thing he cannot control: Sukuna. The king of curses does not bow, does not submit, and he does not allow anyone else to play God while he still breathes. Sukuna watches from the shadows, still biding his time. The boy holding his soul is a disappointment, too hesitant, too fragile, too weak, and the world around him, pathetic. The sorcerers cling to their traditions, their false sense of control, never realizing they've already lost. But then there's him, Gojo Satoru, or at least, the thing wearing his face. The moment Megumi falls, his body stolen, his soul crushed, Sukuna makes his move. There is no Yuji to hold him back, no divine intervention, no limit to his power. And so, in the end, the war is not between sorcerers and curses, not between humans and monsters. It is between a false god and a true king. When Sukuna goes up against Gojo, who isn't Gojo, the battle will be a reenactment of what happened in the original timeline, but with little differences. The battlefield is silent, air thick with cursed energy, the remnants of 1,000 battles still lingering. Two figures stand at the heart of it all. The trump card in the original timeline was Madaraga, but maybe Kenjaku can fare better in this one. Gojo Satoru's body moves with effortless precision, every step light, every breath steady. The six eyes glow behind dark lenses, unreadable, calculating. His presence warps the space around him, an invisible force that rejects the very concept of damage. Opposite to him stands Sukuna, wearing the body of Megumi Fushiguro like a second skin, a new vessel, a new form, but the same insatiable hunger. 10 shadows flicker at his fingertips, a kingdom of curses waiting to be unleashed. The first move is not seen, not heard, only felt. The ground shatters between them and the space between them ceases to exist. A storm of slashes, each one carving through air and stone alike. The blade never lands. It stops before it can even touch, an invisible wall keeping destruction at bay. The retaliation is immediate as Kinjaku sends blue his way. Space collapses, pulling everything toward an inescapable point. The force crushes steel, warps reality itself. But Sukuna does not yield. Shadows extend. A Shikigami takes his place, its body shredded apart in an instant. In a blink, Sukuna moves again, reappearing behind his opponent, blade descending. In the same instant, an explosion swallows the battlefield whole, the signature of red. The impact sends waves of destruction outward, leveling buildings in the distance, reducing the city to dust. The sky itself splits, cracks forming in the air like fractured glass. When the dust settles, Sukuna raises a single hand, and the wheel behind Megumin's head begins to turn. The sky darkens, the ground splits, and Madaraga, a nearly unkillable beast, rises once. Kinjaku doesn't move, doesn't react. He simply watches as the Shikigami stands between them, its form towering, its blade gleaming with deadly intent. The first adaptation begins. Madaraga swings. The blade meets Limitless, stops, then shifts. Kenjaku's eyes narrow. The beast is already adjusting, already learning. Another swing, another shift. Limitless flickers for a fraction of a second, a moment too small for most to notice. But Sukuna sees it, and he strikes. Kenjaku's movements change. He doesn't stand still anymore. He moves constantly, forcing Madaraga to keep up. The beast swings, but the attacks never land. It adapts, but the conditions are always shifting. Sukuna watches, waiting for the moment. Then it happens. A single cut, a scratch along Kenjaku's arm, small, insignificant, but proof. Madaraga is adapting. Kenjaku clicks his tongue as if to say he is irritated. He stops holding back. His 1,000 years of curse energy mastery affords him the ability to wield the six eyes even better than Satoru would. He raises his hand, and this time, the compression is instant. Space folding in on itself before Madaraga can react. The beast is swallowed, crushed into a single point of infinite density. body, it regenerates. It always does. But the next moment, an explosion rips the battlefield apart, turning everything to dust. Sukuna shields himself, feeling the heat, the pressure, the sheer force behind the technique. When the dust clears, Madaraga is still standing, but barely. In a swift motion, a single hand through his chest before he can react. Sukuna's eyes widen. He looks down, sees Kenjaku's arm buried inside him, fingers wrapped around his core. He tries to move. He can't. Limitless has already activated inside his body, freezing him in place. Kinjaku leans in, whispering something to him. A final pulse of cursed energy, hollow purple. It detonates inside Sukuna's chest. There's no time to regenerate, no final trick, no escape. For the first time in 1,000 years, Sukuna dies, and in the end, the world belongs to Kinjaku for the molding. A timeline that allows Gojo to get taken over by Kinjaku spells doom. Kinjaku would definitely further his plans, bringing the destruction he plans closer. That's it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it. How do you think this fight would go? Let us know in the comments.